All right, so some of the names that have been rolled about. Dan Marino was, as part of the panel I was on, the first name that came to mind was Dan Marino. And, of course, Barry Sanders. And then anybody from the Buffalo Bills for any period of time. I felt bad because I was like, you can't put this all on Jim Kelly, Thermal. You can't.
Well, the Giants win was all just – it's not even on
Scott
the kicker.
Norwood. Like, you can't blame Scott. Scott's my dude. Scott's family. Scott Norwood is family to me. Like, his dad – Scott Norwood's dad was my high school baseball coach. And he's the only reason I went to college. And he's the only – like, he's one of the best human beings I've ever – that I ever know. Texter says Larry Fitzgerald.
Deserves to be in the Hall of Fame?
No, the best to never win a Super Bowl.
The best player not to win a Super Bowl is Randy Moss.
I'm not even. Does that say? Okay, so then that adds another question: who was better at their position, Randy Moss, Dan Marino, or Barry Sanders? Who was better at their position?
Man, it comes down to Barry Sanders and Randy Moss.
Because you would say Marino's top 5.
Yeah, but them two right there. But then
they're 1A, 1B.
They both fight a little bit of uphill battle where you got like Emmett and Walter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, obviously one.
Jim Brown's one. Jim Brown's one. Like I can't have that conversation.
Jim Brown was cold.
Jim Brown was number 1. Right.
But the coldest running back I ever laid eyes on, the two. You know, besides Chuck Foreman, Eric Dickerson and Marshall Faulk.
ED was, man. I'm
not a fan. I'm not a fanboy at all. But I got to meet him at the Super Bowl and chop it up with him. It was him and Rod Woodson. And Rod Woodson was sizing me up. I'm like, damn, bro, we light skinned.
Right? Like he was.
I mean, I play defense. He looked me up and he's like, oh, yeah, I remember you. Okay, bro. Like, we here. Like,
Rod
got a chip on his shoulder.
Rod
85 days out the week.
He thought he would see brother light skin with the good hair.
And
right?
He do have good hair.
Right? He had the good hair and he was long.
Yeah.
And Rod would tell you that he was the greatest physical specimen in NFL history. There's probably 10 dudes we could name who thought they looked better in their uniform than anybody else ever.
But Rod Woodson ran track because he went to Purdue.
Yeah, he was a sprinter. Darryl Green whooped that butt in the fastest human competition. But Rod, so he would come. So I mainly back then I would meet everybody at the Players Award banquet in DC, and Grant Hyatt was always kind of a host. So I dealt with all the players that would come to town over the course of 18 years. So I met everybody in that run and stretch. But Rod Woodson was the only player in NFL in the 20 years that I did that checked into the hotel in a suit and tie.
Yeah, he looked sweet.
Like Rod came from the airport to go to sleep in a suit. Yeah. And his hair, there was not a hair out of place.
Yeah. He got that good hair.
He was what, 6'3",
6'2", 6'3", big corner,
215.
Good hit.
Right? Yeah. And Rod thought he was the finest dude ever.
Yeah.
Like Dion thought he was prime, but Dion ain't ever tell you he was the best looking dude. Dion would never say that. But Dion had style. Rod walked into the room and made it known that all of y'all's women's in trouble. There are no safe women in the room when Rod Woodson walked into the room. So, but the best of it, where do you put Barry when it comes to running backs? 3?
Yeah, I mean, you got Walter, Emmett, of course, Jim, Barry. He's
4.
Top 5.
Dickerson make the top 5?
Oh, he should, but
I'm going to be biased and say that Riggins has to be in the top 5 because he evolved from being a national level sprinter at Kansas. Riggo came into the league as a sprinter at running back. He became a fullback, one of the best fullbacks to ever do it.
Yeah,
and he did it in meaningful moments.
But you got to think like Marshall Faulk. I mean, there's so many good running backs. I mean,
it's your 5. You can't be wrong.
At this point, you can't really.
You cannot be wrong.
I mean, just kind of depends.
Give me your best.
I'm gonna put my dad up in there.
Your best 5 receivers.
Oh, well, Jerry
Rice is 1.
Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, Dang. I mean, I mean, Jerry Rice, Randy Moss. Like, I mean, I could just pick any of them. I'm gonna go Andre Johnson.
Huh? Who was better, Andre or Calvin Johnson? Yeah,
I mean,
right? Like that position.
you could go throw
is
T.O. in there, but then you got old school guys. You got
Arthur. Arthur.
the
the first 100 catch in the season,
like
dude.
him, Steve Largent. You got guys that, I mean, there's so many of them. I don't
T.O.
know. Yeah.
T.O. Yeah, good call.
But you got to think you got guys that also are really good where, you got your Sterling Sharps that got injured. We talked off of air, how good or, do you hold it against Jimmy Smith and
Keenan McCardle, both.
Them two, because they both were 1,000-yard receivers out there when they wasn't even really a passing league.
The Marx brothers.
Right. I mean, the Dupers,
with no running game.
With no running game.
Zero. Tony Nathan was it.
You got to think about all the great, players that, you think Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne. You talk about those guys. I mean, you're talking about guys that
Art and Gary.
Yeah, there's so many.
Actually, I go back to Charlie Taylor and Roy Jefferson.
Right.
Like that group, or Charlie Taylor and Bobby Mitchell together.
I mean, you're talking about some real. There's a lot of guys that were
five best quarterbacks.
Harold Carmichael, Tom
best.
Brady, Joe Montana.
Okay.
I will always say Dan Marino because I watched him. I've never seen anything like that in my life.
Okay.
And then just depends on what your flavor is. Are you going winner or are you just going pure quarterback? I wouldn't say like a Brett Favre because he only won one Super Bowl. Same thing. Like then you say like, okay, Aaron Rodgers, but then Johnny Unitas.
Unitas was the GOAT for 20 years.
Right. So you got Johnny Unitas. You got
like your grandfather loved Johnny Unitas.
You got to think somebody that like kind of gets overlooked in that realm, but just when you look off production in the way that football was played then, like a Dan Fouts, guys like the numbers that he was putting up.
Where do you throw Trent Dilfer in this discussion?
Look, Dan Fouts, think about it. Wes Chandler, JJ, John Jefferson, Charlie Joyner, Kellen Winslow, plus maybe the second underrated pass-catching running back in Chuck Muncie.
Yeah.
And then throw in Lionel Little Train James going out of the backfield as well. Fouts didn't
he didn't lack for they didn't have no defense. They only had was it Leroy Smith and that's it.
They really Billy Ray Smith.
Billy Ray
Smith. That was it.
Yeah, that was, and they were horrible.
Billy Ray Smith and Gil Bird. That was
Gil Bird that was the Super Bowl they lost to the 49ers.
Yeah, like that Gil Bird hung around long enough.
There's tons of great players that play. That don't, I mean, when you think of like linebackers, you got to think. Like,
ooh, I got one for you,
London
Jay
Fletcher,
Foreman.
guys like that.
Oh, Jay, this one's for you from the text line. I'm a 49ers fan, and I get a lot of grief for saying Steve Young was way better talent than Joe Montana.
Oh, you got to go to work. That conversation's over. No, not even close. Not even close. He whined and moaned and took over like driving a Lamborghini or Ferrari. He's great. He's good. He's a Hall of Fame player, but he's not Joe Montana.
That is
he
so
never
funny.
was.
I had to read that one. I was like, oh my goodness.
He cold blood. But you know what? Just imagine being the head coach that you go from Joe Montana, the greatest of all time at that point in time, Joe Cool to Steve Young. I mean, that's just man, just go.
Well, that's the Packers going from Favre to Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
Should have been Manning to Luck.
Right? Like it should have been, and it didn't read.
Except they forgot.
No, to press Tim Mouse, that's funny. I had to read it just the way I did because that was special. That was that special. So through the Hall of Fame years, and then the Super Bowl becoming an event, because a lot of legacy before that was based on NFL championships and the separation of AFL type stats, because if you were playing in the AFL, your numbers offensively were better than the NFC. That's just the way it worked. Like when the Packers dominated, it was run game. If you ever put Bart Starr's stats up against today's players.
Hey, dude, I don't mean to cut you off. I had to text Eric Moles about, I was like, hey, man, how many yards you think about Ty Law? He said, I don't know, but I know I had a lot. He's like, but I can tell you, I hit him up for 175 in a touchdown when we were locked up man to man all game. And mind you, he did that with Rob Johnson at quarterback and Alex Van Pelt.
Bruh.
Emoles.
Bruh.
Believe it.
I want to know. Okay, please tell me how you defended knowing that Alex Van Pelt was your quarterback.
I defended. Hey, I'm going to tell you this. I felt more comfortable with Alex Van Pelt at that point in time because he played quarterback.
Yeah.
Rob Johnson, I think, after he left Buffalo, became a better quarterback. But then Alex got hurt in like warm-ups, and we had to have the guy that played the practice squad. Man, we went down to Miami and got destroyed. Do you hear me? Not only was the game like the late game, we got destroyed. It was hot as Hades. It was the last game of the season, and I will never forget this being on the plane. The last game of the season, and it's a long flight from Miami, especially after you lose the Dolphins. We beat the brakes off them at home. We're flying home, and I'll never forget. You know, everybody's like, "Hey, you know, we just got Tom Donahoe as the new GM, new GM." So he wanted to come in and cut everybody, and that's when Bruce and all those guys left. So it was funny. We look up there, and of course, he's sitting in first class. He had a suit on, but his tie was undone, and he looked like he was mad as heck. Like, dog, we want to go into the playoffs like 6 weeks ago. What you mad at now? Like, you all of a sudden mad now? But he had the light, you know, because he was up there kind of like where the stewardess kind of get you drinks and stuff. And he was standing there, and my boy Bryson, he's like, what you think he's thinking about? I said, man, he looking back here to see who's up or not, just so who you want to cut here in a couple of days. That's what he's thinking. He started laughing.
Like he's going to the last road game mad. Just mad. Because look, y'all did this to me.
Yeah.
And no accountability.
It didn't have anything to do with that that Thurman Thomas left, Bruce Smith left, Reed left, all the guys that the Hall of Famers left because you came in. Henry Jones, all our really good established players that, kept us in the playoff race and got us to the playoffs all the time left. It was all our fault because you had, Willie Lump playing out there and Chris Ferris, the left tackle from UCLA, was hot garbage. That was when he had his first Adidas commercial when he was one with Cade McNown and they went to the Rose Bowl. You think this dude was supposed to, man, he showed up. He was supposed to be this big mauler from UCLA because they were talking about he was a road grader. Remember when UCLA was in the Rose Bowl or the Rose Bowl? Yeah. Man, he showed up. My man was like 6'9", 278, just getting ran through.
Straight up long for no reason.
John Abraham and Ellis and those dudes from the Jets were throwing him out the club. Say, hey, look, man, we told you have to pay a fee to get in the club, and we are throwing you out the club. Get out of here. I mean, they literally were taking him behind the back of his pants and throwing him out the way and sacking the quarterback. It was an absolute sack party over on his side. Then Jason Taylor and Trace Armstrong, Big Daddy Tim Bowens, and Gardner. I mean, they came out there. I remember we played them in Buffalo. It was cold, too. We were like, yeah, we're going to get after these dudes, right? Because it's cold, right? Yeah. They're coming from Miami. Yeah. Them boys came out there. I'll never forget. Big Tim Bowens and Gardner came out there with no sleeves on, greased up, and they were like, "Yeah, it's cold out here, but we know we about to get some sacks today. Get some sacks today." Yo, the first 3 plays, it was like so and so on the sack, so and so on the sack, so and so on the sack. Punt team, get ready. Hey, I didn't unstrap my helmet or my chin strap when them do because I knew it was punt team. Get ready. Chris Moore, I said, kick it high, kick that bad boy high because I don't, we don't want him to get in return. So it was,
the insight behind the bully mentality of the NFL. I would look similar day being on the sideline in DC.
Yeah.
And this is in the ending days of the Hogs, right? So Bostic is retiring, and Bostic, who was greatly undersized even at his best. He's playing center in the NFC East against Randy White. Like he had no good Sundays. Like he had no good Sundays. And then when Grimm moved and they wanted to move Grimm outside, well, they had drafted a kid from BYU called Mo Iwanibi. And Mo,
a lineman?
Yeah. Mo was athletic, but Mo improved his body up through chemistry.
Oh, okay.
But when they tested him, when you have to stop, you drop down. Of course, where you start before the season is not where you finish,
Right.
weight-wise. And Reggie White and Jerome Brown,
Oh, that's a
Clyde Simmons.
Yeah, and Pitts.
They had a day.
And Golick.
Listen, I've never heard an offensive lineman scream before.
Yeah. I mean, when you think
I've never look. He was a grown. Look, this is a 300-pound man.
Give a lookout block. Look out!
Oh, he was Jay. I got kicked off the sideline because I was laughing so hard, like because I heard it, and then I heard the players. They say, "What?" Because the first thing a player at the back, right at the edge, where as far as the players can go, and they ask you, "What's so funny?" And I'm like, "Listen to your boy." Like, listen to your boy. And the next play, sure enough, Reggie forklifted him, and he made a sound that no grown man on the football field should make.
Yeah, Chris Ferris used to give lookout box like, "Look out, Austin, he's coming again." I shouldn't be talking about Chris like that, man. But I'm like, dang, the thing is, like, you be in the locker. If you're in the locker room and you see dudes like that getting paid, and then the GM stingy on your contract, you be looking at him like, dog, how does this?
Mo was gone immediately. He was like that. He was gone immediately.
He said ASAP. You don't know what that means. As soon as possible.
Look, we'll go to break. We'll give away more squares. I got another trivia question for you, and then we'll get into it. I want to go back to the 70s. I want to go back to the great running backs that played alongside your dad in that space. And I want to talk receivers because a couple of texts goes, does anybody other than DP remember Paul Warfield? Yeah, we're going to talk about that crew back in the day when we come back old school.